yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
My name is Murray Seaman, and I was drafted and inducted into the Army on June 5th, 1941. I remember some things about my training, particularly because during the training, which I got the 13 weeks, I got training in Camp Upton. And during that period of time, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Prior to that, I had applied to OCS and the Judge Advocates Corps because I had been practicing law for 3 or 4 years before I was inducted into the Army. So I applied for JAG, but I was told that they were not accepting any applications into JAG. After Pearl Harbor, when I finished basic training, I decided to reapply again. I was assigned to the quartermaster OCS school at Camp Lee. I became a 90-day wonder, quote unquote. I was assigned with three other men in the same class that I was to Fort Hamilton. I was assigned to an outfit called the 6th Port of Embarkation. It was an Army unit that dealt with the loading of cargo and personnel onto ships, and also when you got to wherever you were going to discharge cargo and personnel from those ships. And that was the job of the 6th Port of Embarkation. I was assigned to report to the Brooklyn Navy Yard. During the time that I was in Fort Hamilton, I was a 2nd Louis, which was, you know, hardly wet behind the ears in Army parlance. And I was assigned to report to a Major Wallach. And when I reported to Major Wallach, he said to me, look, Lieutenant, I don't know whether you have any experience with ships or not, but this is what your job is now with me. The 1st Division is going overseas to England. And the 1st Division has 20,000 troops. And the Queen Mary is in the dock. And we have to put all of those troops in segments in different parts of the Queen Mary. And you and me, he says, are the only ones that are going to do it. So we had an outline of the ships, like a cross-section of each deck or whatever of the ship. Some compartments had 20, some compartments had 50, and we had to put the whole Queen Mary on that, the whole 1st Division, the big red one they called it, into that ship. And we did, including our own. We put our own material. We're supposed to go with them. And the Queen Mary took off with the 1st Division and all our equipment from 6th Port headquarters, and they went to England. And when we went back to Fort Hamilton that night, the next day we were supposed to go with them to England. The orders came not to go. And we were all surprised. We didn't know what was happening. Why aren't we going? All our equipment is there. What are we going to do? Everybody was asking those questions. And we found out that instead of going there, we were going to North Africa. We left for North Africa on November 2nd, I think it was, either November 1st or November 2nd. We went on a flat-bottom Swedish commercial boat and with other troops, and we went on the seas, of course, they didn't tell us where we're going until we were almost 3/4 of the way over. Three-quarters of the way over, they distributed booklets which had French language, you know, different things, and pictures and so on and so forth, and told us we were going to land in Casablanca. Now, we were there. We landed in Casablanca November 18th, so we were actually on water for almost 18 days. The first 10 days were used in crossing the ocean, but the other 8 days we were circling around outside of Casablanca, maybe 5 miles or 10 miles outside of Casablanca, and we were waiting there until the Battle of Casablanca was over and they could bring us in. And they told us that, at least we learned through, the word gets around pretty fast by rumor in the Army, but we were told, and we all believed, that the reason why they were very concerned, we were in a convoy of 100 ships, and you'd get up in the morning and go on deck, and you'd see all these ships going, and the ships zigzagged. Every 15 minutes they changed direction, and as they changed direction, they signaled with a, you know, like a foghorn signal on every boat. So you'd hear 100 boats giving this foghorn signal every 15 minutes, and then they changed direction from this way to that way until, and the last 8 days we were just circling around waiting for the battle to go over. But they were always afraid of submarines at that time. Well, we had a convoy of destroyers to try to protect us, and I guess they did, because none of the ships were ever hit. When we got there, we had to, our job was to start working the port. And when we got into Casablanca, into the port, and we saw sunken ships there in the harbor. And the one thing that I remember very distinctly was the ship, the Jean Bart. It was the pride of the French Navy. And all you could see of that ship, it was sunk, and all you could see was its turrets sticking out of the water. But alongside in the rest of the port, there were sunken ships. There was a big battle there before we got there, conducted by the Navy. The USS Brooklyn and the Air Force really conducted the Battle of north of Casablanca. We left Casablanca by train. It was about at least 800-900 miles. And we bivouacked out there in Iran. And we experienced air raids every night. Our next stop after Iran was Naples. Now, the outfit was broken up into two because Naples alone had difficulties. It had been bombed by both British and American Air Force. When we got there were sunken ships all over the port. We had to, we did, but the engineers, whoever they were, put planks over the keels of these sunken ships. And that's how we got ashore, by going over these planks that were stretched from one keel to another. However, Naples was important because we had to get supplies, land to support the troops. So there was a contingent of the 6th Port personnel that also went to Salerno. And when they accomplished the capture of Salerno and operated that port, which was a smaller port, then that contingent rejoined the outfit in Naples. The Germans were embedded up there in the Monte Cassino. We were in Naples. Monte Cassino was no more than 15 miles away from Naples. And our army, the 5th Army, headed by Mark Clark, was stymied completely. They just couldn't get past it. Every attempt that they made was repelled by the Germans, who were in a superior position, and we just couldn't get there. One day, Mark Clark, the story as I understand it, gets orders from General Eisenhower in England. Go up and get them. I don't have enough troops. I don't have enough supplies. I don't have enough artillery. That was what Mark Clark was saying in the Fifth Army. I need some reinforcements. Fell on deaf ears. General Eisenhower said, get up there and get rid of them. We got to keep the German army busied up there so they don't send troops over, you know, to France when we invade. So he sends 2 Texas divisions, the 34th and the 36th Texas divisions went across the Rapido River and tried to march up, conquer, you know, capture Monte Cassino. Each division, there was 15,000 troops at that time. It used to be 20, but they reduced it to 15. Each of those divisions lost 7,500 men. I think World War II was really a patriotic expression. And I think America does have these patriotic expressions all during its history. And it sort of inspires Americans to transcend the normal values of of civil life. That there's other things that are more important that we must be prepared to sacrifice. And I think eventually, in times of great crisis, like we're going through today in terms of economic crisis, what we went through in World War II, what the Army went through, and what the public went through too, is simply a source of inspiration that revives our faith and our confidence in the American people and what they stand for.
My name is Stanley Romain. I enlisted so that I wouldn't be drafted. I got into the enlisted reserve corps to study pre-radar and spent 3 months up in Troy, New York, and 3 months in New York City. And then I wound up at Cornell University in a pre-radar study. When I enlisted, I went down to what's called a REPL depot, a replacement depot in Florida at a university. And we sat around there waiting to be assigned to some outfit. And a guy by the name of Goldstein and he worked for S.J. Klein on the Square in New York City. And he had seen a lot of shows, I had seen a lot of shows. We decided we weren't doing anything besides playing the 4Fs football, so we decided we'd put on a show, try and raise some money for the Army. And we put on a show stealing all kinds of things that we had seen in shows on Broadway, Hell's a-Poppin' and other shows. I'll give you one example. Our show started, I was the MC. I had 8 costume changes. I was the MC, and I said, this is going to be an 8-hour show. And a guy up in the balcony says, how long? I said, 8 hours. He shoots himself, and we come in with a stretcher and carry him out. We had a guy who could get out of all kinds of chains. He got out of this one, he got out of that one, and so forth. In the last analysis, we put chains on him that no human being could ever get out of. And he was struggling all during the show. At the end of the show, when people came out, he was at the box office still struggling to get out of the chains. So that's the corny humor that we had, but it was helpful to raise money for the Red Cross. And later on, we did that same show at the University of Wisconsin when I was there studying Spanish. I'll tell you an interesting story, interesting to me. One night at dinner in Great Neck, I was sitting with a chap who was talking about having been in the Army, where was I in the Army, and I said, I told him some of my particulars, and then I said, I wound up in the ASTP, Army Specialized Program, at University of Wisconsin. He said, I was at the University of Wisconsin. I said, really? What were you doing there? He said, I was with ASTP. I said, really? What language? He said, Spanish. I said, I was in the Spanish division. And I looked at him, I said, oh my God, I would never have recognized Julian Kane. He said, you're Stan Romain. I didn't recognize him at all, and it came out of the blue. We found out we were in the same outfit in the University of Wisconsin. We went our separate ways. He went into some kind of decoding thing, and I wound up in the infantry. We were supposed to be Spanish interpreters, and well, we were going to be second lieutenants directing people because we spoke Spanish so well. Didn't happen. I wound up in the infantry via the Air Corps. I wound up in England and went into the Battle of the Bulge with the 76th Infantry Division, 2nd Battalion Headquarters Company. I didn't find it very enjoyable. It was difficult. We were under bombardment a number of times and in danger a number of times. But I was one line behind the infantry doughboys because I was in charge of a secret decoder where I would get a message from headquarters, which I had to decode on my machine and then give instructions to the rest of the troops. And I carried that decoder with me at all times with the instructions, if I ever going to be captured, to open up a hand grenade and fall on the decoder. Well, thanks a lot. We crossed the Rhine at Saint-Gouard, which is St. George. And we were under some shelling. And I got separated, and we did this, incidentally, at 12 midnight. And so I got separated from the rest of the battalion climbing up a hill. And I had with me a young guy, and I had planned if we were going to get captured, I'd give him this message center thing that he could fall on a hand grenade and blow it up. Well, it didn't work out that way. We climbed up this incline, and we were all alone. And when we got to the top, the dawn was beginning to break. And being a good soldier, I remembered to take off your helmet and just put your head up above that line to see what was in front of you. I took off my helmet. I just put my head up over the line, and I saw 100 Germans coming at us. I ducked, and I said to the kid with me, listen, take this message center decoder, and if we get captured, you're supposed to fall on it with a hand grenade and blow it up. He said, I'm not doing that. So I looked again because there was something in my mind. When I went up there, all those Germans were heading right for us, but they all had their hands on their head. They'd been captured by 4 other soldiers. So we came out and we joined the 4 soldiers, and we were heroes. We had like 50 Germans with their hands on their head, and me and the kid joined the other guys, and we went back to headquarters. When the war in Europe was over, my outfit was scheduled to go to Japan. I wasn't too interested in going there. And I found out I had time off in the States before we were going to ship out to Japan, that I had enough points to get out of the Army. I got in that line quickly and was out of the Army without going to Japan. We were supposed to be transferred for the 8th Infantry Division. And I had those experiences. I saw a lot of terrible things, but gradually those memories melted away, and only the fun times remained. It's a common expression, war is hell. They ought to know war is hell. I'm very active in the peace movement these days, and I'm trying to do my best to make sure the United States does not get in any other wars. World War II was not a picnic. It was not glory. It was not wonderful. It was full of blood and guts and gore and wounds and trouble. and I hope to never see that again.
My name is Jules Siegel. I was drafted 10 months before Pearl Harbor. This was in March of 1941. I was told to report to my old public school in Brooklyn, and my parents, as I remember, were walking up the street at 6 a.m. in the morning on a very cold morning, and both of them sighed and cried at the same time. We approached the school, and there were quite a few other enlistees or draftees waiting outside. They handed each of us a card and told us to report back to the Jamaica Armory in Queens, and as such, I did report there. And we remained in that place until late evening. Whereupon that, we got on the train